Okay, this is a video on sharpening hook knives. I'm going to do two videos. This video is going to be on sharpening hook knives that have the rail system, where these two bright rails have a hollow that's deeper between them, and those get sharpened on the inside. The other video is going to be on sharpening hook knives that have the bevel on the outside and that need to get sharpened on the outside. That'll be a separate video. For now, let's start with this. So the key with this is that if you place the hook knife on a flat surface, whether it's the armrest of a chair or a block stuck into a vise or anything like that, or just a block laid on your leg, such that as this rocks back and forth, there's room for the dowel to rock with it, then the dowel will remain flat on those two rails, perfectly flat on those two rails, and you will get a nice, essentially what you'd want to avoid doing is changing the angles that have been established by the makers. And so the beautiful thing about these rails is, as long as the dowel can rock and adjust with the knife, then it will remain self-leveled on those rails. So, let's see. I like to use the same sandpaper that I use for the Sloyd knives. The nice thing about it is that there's always this bit at the end that you can't use for the Sloyd knives. That's the perfect amount for hook knives. I have an 8-inch length of dowel. The curve is just such that it's narrower than the curve of the hook knife. And I think it's important to have the dowel be, you want to put the sandpaper on the end of the dowel, because what ends up happening is by putting the sandpaper on the end of the dowel, you end up being able to use the side, the heel of your palm, to easily brace the sandpaper like this. If you had the whole thing in the middle, then you'd be holding it like this. There would be nothing to brace the end against, and it would wiggle around more. So by having it here, this can brace against the side of your hand. Now this is 400 grit, and you'll notice how I have my thumb up, and I'm going to do two motions at the same time. One motion is a twist that'll get me from here to here, and the other motion is a push. And the push goes, so this is the sharp side, this is the back spine of the blade, sharp side over here. So the push goes away from the edge. So it's a twist and a push, like that. So twist and a push. I'm not using a ton of pressure. This is a fresh piece of sandpaper. The rails don't need much metal removed to make it nice and sharp. And unlike the Sloyd knife, where you're looking for that flash of light from the secondary bevel to tell you whether you've gone far enough or not, what happens here is that the push motion is going to create a burr on the underside that you will feel when you have completely removed any secondary bevel. Because what's happening is, let me draw a picture. So, here's your hook knife, and it's dull. This is if you're looking at it under a microscope. What ends up happening is that here, and here, and here, and here, and here, and here, I should curve this under here more. So this line, this straight line here, represents the dowel going across it, right? So the dowel goes across it here, and boom, 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 boom. When it gets, and let me redraw this as though it were magnified. So when this material is removed, when it gets to that point there, where there's no longer a rounded bit here, it's going to push a little bit of metal, just that little curl right here. That's going to get pushed off the back edge. It's still going to be attached, but it's going to be hanging there. That's what you feel with your hand when you go far enough with the dowel and the sandpaper. So again, it's pushing like that. And what you're looking for is to feel that wire edge. This shouldn't take very long, particularly if the knife is not that dull. But you want to go until you feel the burr along the entire edge, not just in one spot. You need to make sure you feel it the entire edge. So I've got the burr down there all the way. I don't quite have the burr on that tip there, so I'm just going to do a couple more passes, and that should get me the burr on the tip. It's so small you can't see it. You can only feel it. Okay, so now I've gone far enough with my lowest grit. I'll put the sheath back on the knife. I'm going to put my next grit on. So I'm looking for 800 at this point. Put the cap back on the Sharpie. Okay. And now, just like with the Sloyd knife, I'm going to start walking my way up through the grits. And just like with the Sloyd knife, I only need to do about 10 to 15 passes. Now notice I'm not trying to remove that burr. And also notice that this isn't super tightly wrapped. It just doesn't matter. Okay. I've done the 800. Put the cap on the hook knife. Wrap it up with the 2000. You can do 1500 or 2000. Doesn't really matter. Now we do this again. Now again, as long as you are, what you don't want to do is put it down like this. Because if you put it down like this, then the whole thing can't rock. And there's only one way in which you are correctly registered on it, by keeping the handle up and allowing it to wiggle back and forth like this. What you're paying attention to is that dowel flat on both bevels? You can feel it rock back and forth. And as long as it's flat on both dowels, and as long as this can move and the dowel can move with it, you will find that it is self-registering, and you'll have much better results than if you put that handle down and hold the whole thing steady. It's very counterintuitive, and it drives a lot of woodworkers crazy, but it just works better. Okay, so now we've got our final grit. Notice that I'm putting the sheath on this knife every single time I put it down. That's important. Okay, 3000. Now, I'm going to strop after this, and I will do a separate video on stropping, but you don't need to strop in order to have a good, clean knife finish. That being said, stropping will, if you have good sharpening underneath the stropping will make your hook knife work that much better. So it is worth considering. One of the easiest ways to strop is to have a good smooth dowel like this one, and to just put some stropping compound on the dowel itself, and essentially do it with, or you can do it even without the dowel, actually. I'm sorry, without the compound. Now, here's the last thing you need to do. You need to remove that wire edge that's still there. And actually, I'm going to do this with that 3000 grit still on the dowel. Now, what I find, different people do this step different ways. What I find easiest is to simply hold it up like this, and then I can tell if I am too far, I'm going to ruin that edge I just created, right? If I'm not on it enough, I'm not actually going to touch that wire edge at all. But I can see when I am exactly on it, and I essentially go like that. And by keeping it 2 inches away from my nose, I can tell when I'm on it. And you can actually feel when you're on it. Just like that. Notice that I'm going away from the edge the entire time. Just like that. Thanks, guys.